"Get that Omega away from my son," Alpha King Caleb Blackwood growled, but the entire royal court had already gone too still to obey him. Ava Miller was on her knees in the center of the throne hall, one hand pressed gently over the ears of the Alpha King's wild cub, the other wrapped around the torn sleeve of her plain servant dress. 5 minutes ago, Noah Blackwood had been screaming so hard the crystal lamps above the court trembled. 5 minutes ago, every noble in the room had stepped back from the little heir as if he were a curse wearing a child's face. Now the boy was silent, curled against the weakest Omega in the palace like she was the only warm place left in the world. Ava did not understand why he had chosen her. She did not understand why his shaking fingers clung to her wrist, or why the cold marble beneath her knees suddenly felt less real than the tiny heartbeat pressed against her chest. All she knew was that the room was too loud for him. Too sharp, too full of perfume, polished silver, old fear, and powerful wolves pretending they were not afraid of a crying child. "Your Majesty," Lady Madison Vale said, her voice sweet enough to cut. She must have done something to him. Ava felt those words land across her back like frost. She knew that tone. She had heard it in kitchens, in corridors, in every place where highborn wolves spoke about Omegas as if they were furniture that breathed. Weak, scentless, useless. A girl like Ava was supposed to lower her eyes, disappear into corners, and apologize for taking up air. But Noah made a soft, broken sound against her collarbone, and instead of shrinking, Ava bent her head closer to him. "It's all right," she whispered, so softly even the court leaned forward to hear. "You don't have to be royal right now. Just breathe." Caleb stopped halfway down the obsidian steps of his throne. He was a towering man in black, all-controlled power and winter-dark authority, the kind of king who could quiet a battlefield with one look. Yet the sight before him had stolen the command from his mouth. His son, who had not allowed a healer to touch him in months, was breathing in time with a servant. Not a noblewoman. Not a Luna candidate. Not someone the council had chosen. Ava Miller, the Omega who had been scrubbing wine from the floor when Noah broke free. Councilman Grant Keller lifted a hand toward the guards. "Remove her before she contaminates the royal air." Noah's head snapped up. A low warning sound rose from his tiny chest, not wild this time, but clear, protective. Ava felt his fingers tighten around her wrist. "Noah," Caleb said, and for the first time, his voice was not a command. It was a plea hidden under stone. The cub looked at his father, then back at Ava. Slowly, carefully, he lifted her hand between both of his. The court held its breath. Madison's face lost its color. A pale silver light began to bloom beneath Noah's touch, spreading over Ava's skin in the shape of a crescent moon wrapped around a wolf's crown. Ava froze. The mark pulsed once, bright enough to reflect in every shocked eye in the throne hall. Then Noah pressed her hand against his cheek and whispered the first word anyone had heard from him since the queen died. "Safe." Caleb went utterly still. The court did not move. Even the royal wolves carved into the pillars seemed to watch her. And when the Alpha King finally spoke, his voice was lower than thunder and colder than snow. "That mark," he said, staring at Ava as if she had just awakened a ghost, "died with my queen." Only 1 hour earlier, Ava Miller had been invisible, which was exactly how the royal court preferred its Omegas. She had entered the throne hall through the servants' corridor with a brass bucket in one hand and a stack of linen cloths in the other, keeping her eyes on the polished marble because eye contact with nobles was considered arrogance when it came from someone like her. The hall rose around her in black stone, silver banners, and frozen light, every pillar carved with wolves that looked more alive than most of the people standing beneath them. At the far end, Alpha King Caleb Blackwood sat on the obsidian throne, silent and unreadable, while the High Council debated the future of his bloodline, as if his grief were a legal document. Ava was not supposed to listen. She was supposed to scrub spilled wine, collect broken glass, and disappear before anyone important remembered she existed. Lady Madison Vale made certain that did not happen. She let her crystal cup slip from her fingers just as Ava passed behind her chair, red wine spreading across the white marble like a stain that knew exactly where to go. "Careful, little Omega," Madison said, not sounding sorry at all. "You would not want the court to think you are as useless as your scent suggests." A few noble women laughed behind their gloved hands. Ava knelt without answering. The linen cloth was rough beneath her fingers, and the stone was cold enough to ache through the thin fabric of her dress, but she kept her face calm. She had learned a long time ago that humiliation became heavier when you tried to fight it in front of people who enjoyed watching you lose. Her wolf, small and quiet somewhere deep inside her chest, did not growl. It only curled tighter, as if hiding from the sharp perfume and sharper smiles. Councilman Grant Keller stood near the throne, his silver cane tapping once against the floor. Your Majesty, the matter cannot be delayed. The heir has not appeared in public for months. The Packs are asking whether Prince Noah remains fit to inherit. The air changed. Even Madison stopped smiling. Caleb did not move, yet the room seemed to lower its head around him. My son is 5 years old, he said, each word controlled so tightly it sounded carved from ice. Grant bowed just enough to survive the insult hidden in his next sentence. He is also royal blood. If he cannot be calmed, guided, and presented, then the court must consider the stabilizing influence of a new queen. Madison lowered her lashes in perfect modesty, as if she had not been waiting for those words all morning. Ava pressed the cloth harder into the marble, wishing she could vanish into the floor. She had heard rumors about the young prince in the kitchens. Some said he broke windows when people came too close. Some said he cried through the night. Some said he had not spoken since his mother was lost at Frostpine Pass. Ava had never believed the cruelest versions. People always called pain dangerous when they did not want to understand it. Then the bronze doors at the side of the hall opened. 2 royal handlers stepped in first, tense and pale, followed by a small boy in a dark coat that looked too formal for his narrow shoulders. Noah Blackwood did not look like a monster. He looked exhausted. His amber eyes were too bright, his breathing too fast, his little hands clenched so tightly in his sleeves that his knuckles had gone white. The court leaned toward him with hunger disguised as concern. The scent of dozens of alphas thickened the air. Jewelry flashed. Whispers scraped along the walls. Noah froze. Ava saw it before anyone else did. The way his shoulders rose. The way his eyes darted toward the windows, the guards, the silver trim on Grant Keller's cane. He was not preparing to attack. He was drowning in noise no one else cared to hear. Madison stepped forward with a velvet smile and a silk handkerchief scented with something sweet and false. Come here, Your Highness, she murmured. Noah's face crumpled. A sound tore out of him, not rage, but terror sharpened into a cry. The handlers reached for him. The nobles recoiled. Caleb surged from the throne. And Ava, still kneeling beside the spilled wine, found the prince stumbling backward until his heel caught the edge of her bucket. The brass rang against the marble. Every eye turned. Noah looked at her. Ava should have bowed her head. She should have crawled away. Instead, she slowly set the cloth down and whispered. Everyone stopped breathing so loudly. The words should have ruined her. An Omega servant did not correct a royal court. She did not tell nobles, alphas, councilmen, and an alpha king how to stand, how to breathe, or how to treat the heir to the northern Packs. The silence that followed Ava's whisper was so complete that the faint tick of Grant Keller's silver watch could be heard from across the marble floor. Then Madison laughed once, soft and bright, as if Ava had performed a little trick for the room. How charming, she said. The floor girl thinks she understands royal blood. Ava kept her eyes on Noah. The little prince had backed himself against the base of a carved pillar, his shoulders pressed to the stone wolf behind him, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. He was not looking at the throne. He was not looking at Madison. He was staring at the silver cane in Grant Keller's hand, at the polished guard helmets, at the chandelier, throwing hard shards of light across the floor. Too much. Everything was too much. Ava knew that feeling. She knew what it was like to be surrounded by people who had already decided what you were before you opened your mouth. Grant's cane struck the marble again. Remove the Omega. 2 guards stepped forward. Noah made a sharp sound and flinched so hard his small shoulder hit the pillar. Caleb's command cracked through the hall before they reached Ava. Stop. The guards froze instantly. Caleb descended 1 step from the throne, his black coat moving like a shadow over stone. His gaze cut to Ava, cold and searching. Explain yourself. Ava's mouth went dry. Every instinct told her to lower her head and beg forgiveness. Instead, she swallowed and looked toward the king only for a second before returning her attention to Noah. The room is hurting him, she said. A murmur moved through the court. Madison's smile thinned. Absurd. No, Ava said, and that single word felt more dangerous than any blade. She pointed carefully, not at people, but at the things around them. The metal, the perfume, the lights, the posturing. Everyone is pushing their scent into the air because they are afraid, and he can feel all of it. Grant's expression hardened. The air is not some frightened pet to be soothed by kitchen wisdom. Noah covered his ears. The movement was small, but Ava saw Caleb's face change. Not enough for anyone else to name, but enough. A crack in the ice. Madison stepped closer to the prince with the scented handkerchief still folded in her palm. Your Highness, she cooed, come to me. A future queen must be able to comfort you. Noah's eyes widened. The sweetness in the cloth rolled through the air like spoiled honey. Ava felt her own wolf recoil from it. It was not motherly. It was imitation. A painted window pretending to be sunrise. Noah slid sideways along the pillar, trying to escape the scent without turning his back on the room. One handler reached for him. Another moved to block the path toward the throne. The court leaned in, waiting for proof of failure, proof that a 5-year-old child could be used to force a crown onto Madison Vale's head. Ava understood then. Noah had not been brought here to be helped. He had been brought here to be displayed, frightened, and measured. If he broke, the council would call it evidence. If Madison calmed him, they would call it destiny. But Noah did not run to Madison. He did not run to the handlers. He slipped past a guard, crossed the last few feet of marble, and stopped behind Ava's kneeling form, gripping the back of her plain dress with trembling fingers. Ava did not touch him yet. She did not dare. She only angled her body slightly between him and the court, making herself smaller, softer, less like a wall and more like a place to hide. Caleb's eyes locked on his son's hands twisted in Ava's skirt. The entire throne hall seemed to inhale at once. Ava lifted one hand, palm open, and spoke without looking away from Noah. Please, she said, her voice low but steady. No sudden movement. No commands. No silver near him. Give him 10 seconds of quiet, or you will lose him again. 10 seconds of quiet should not have felt like a miracle, but in that throne hall, it did. Caleb raised one hand, and the guard stepped back. The movement was small, controlled, almost invisible, yet the effect rolled through the room like winter settling over a lake. No one spoke. No one laughed. Even Grant Keller lifted his silver cane off the floor and held it still. Ava felt Noah's fingers tremble in the fabric of her dress, and she knew every noble eye was fixed on her back, waiting for her to make one mistake large enough to condemn her. She did not turn around. She did not reach for the boy too quickly. She lowered herself from her knees to sit on the marble, ignoring the cold that seeped through her thin servant dress, and slowly placed the brass bucket on its side so the polished rim faced away from him. Better, she whispered. Noah did not answer, but the tight, broken sound in his breathing softened by a thread. Ava moved the linen cloth over the bucket, covering the shine. Then she glanced at the guards without lifting her chin. The helmets, she said carefully. They are reflecting the chandelier. One of the guards looked offended. Caleb's voice came from the steps of the throne, quiet and absolute. Remove them. Metal shifted. Helmets were tucked beneath arms. The sharp glare on the marble dimmed. Noah's grip loosened, not enough to let go, but enough for Ava to breathe. Madison's perfume still clung to the air, rich and sweet and wrong. So Ava picked up the damp linen and folded it gently over her own shoulder, giving Noah something plain to focus on. Look here, she murmured. Not at them. Just here. His amber eyes flicked to the cloth, then to her face. Up close, he looked younger than 5, not because his body was small, but because fear had stripped all royal polish from him. He was only a child in a room full of adults discussing him as if he were a storm to be managed. Ava's chest tightened. You do not have to perform for them, she said. A ripple of disapproval moved through the court, but she kept her voice low, steady, and warm. You do not have to be the heir right now. You do not have to be brave in front of people who are making the room feel too big. You only have to breathe. Noah stared at her, and the first tear slipped silently down his cheek. Not a dramatic sob. Not the wild cry the court feared. Just one tear, silver in the hard light. Ava lifted her sleeve slowly, giving him time to pull away, and when he did not, she draped the soft fabric lightly over one of his ears, then the other, muffling the room without trapping him. His shoulders dropped. Someone gasped. Ava began to hum, barely louder than the breath moving through her own lungs. She did not know where the melody came from. It rose out of her like something remembered by her bones rather than her mind, gentle and old, carrying the hush of snow over pine trees and moonlight on a quiet roof. Caleb went still on the throne steps. His eyes sharpened, not with anger this time, but recognition he did not want to name. Madison's face hardened. Grant's mouth thinned into a line. Noah leaned forward until his forehead rested against Ava's shoulder. The court had seen queens and jewels fail to quiet him. They had seen healers, tutors, handlers, and noblewomen leave with shaking hands and pale faces. Yet the servant girl in a plain gray dress, the weak Omega with no title and almost no scent, had done what none of them could do. Ava felt the little prince's breathing match hers, slow and uneven, then slower still. Her own fear remained, cold beneath her ribs, but she folded it away where Noah could not feel it. "There," she whispered. "That is it. Stay with me, little wolf." Noah made a small sound against her sleeve, almost a word, almost a sigh. Then his hand slid down and wrapped around her wrist. The touch was light, trusting. Caleb took one step closer, and Ava heard it, clear in the silence, the impossible break in the Alpha King's breathing. Caleb did not let the court call it a miracle. Miracles belonged to temples, frightened whispers, and stories told by people who wanted answers without paying for them. Kings required explanations. He ordered the throne hall cleared with a single lift of his hand, and the nobles obeyed in a hush of silk, polished shoes, and swallowed outrage. Madison was the last to move, her pale eyes fixed on Noah's small fingers wrapped around Ava's wrist, as if the sight had insulted every law she had planned to use. Grant Keller followed her more slowly, his silver cane tucked beneath his arm now, silent for the first time since the hearing began. Ava stayed seated on the marble until Caleb looked down at her and said, "You will come with us." It was not an invitation. The royal wing stretched behind the throne hall like the inside of a storm cloud, all dark wood, high windows, and lamps glowing behind frosted glass. Ava walked with Noah pressed against her side, one hand still holding her sleeve, while Caleb moved a few feet ahead of them with the stillness of a predator, forcing himself not to turn around too quickly. Royal guards followed at a careful distance. No one touched Ava. No one touched Noah. The quiet was almost worse than the court, because it gave Ava space to feel what she had done. She had spoken over nobles. She had corrected guards. She had held the Alpha King's son in front of the entire court. An Omega had been punished for far less. When they entered a private sitting room, Caleb dismissed everyone with a glance. The doors closed behind the last guard, leaving only the king, the servant, and the child who had somehow placed himself between them. A fire burned low in a stone hearth, but Ava still felt cold. Caleb turned to face her. Without the throne behind him, he looked no less royal. He looked more dangerous, because there was nothing ceremonial left to soften him. "Who sent you?" he asked. Ava blinked. "No one, your majesty." "Who taught you that song?" "I do not know." His jaw tightened. "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." Noah shifted closer to Ava, his cheek against her arm. Caleb's gaze dropped to the movement, and something crossed his face so quickly Ava almost missed it. Pain, hidden under discipline. He took one step toward his son. Noah stiffened. Caleb stopped immediately. The room held its breath around them. "Noah," he said, low and careful, the name shaped with more tenderness than the court would have believed possible. "Come here." Noah did not move. Ava felt his fingers knot tighter in her sleeve. Caleb extended one hand, slowly, giving the boy every chance to choose him. For a moment, hope flickered in the space between father and child. Then Noah turned his face into Ava's dress and made a small warning sound, not loud, not wild, but clear enough to break something invisible in the room. Caleb withdrew his hand as if he had touched winter glass. Ava's heart twisted before she could stop it. She had seen powerful men angry before. She had seen them insulted, challenged, and denied. This was different. The Alpha King looked at his son as if he were standing on the far side of a frozen river with no bridge left between them. "He never used to do that," Caleb said, so quietly it almost did not sound meant for her. Ava lowered herself onto the edge of a cushioned bench, letting Noah sit beside her without forcing him. "He is not rejecting you," she said. Caleb's eyes snapped to hers, sharp as midnight. Any wiser servant would have fallen silent. Ava should have apologized. Instead, she looked at the little boy hiding against her sleeve and continued, "He is afraid you will disappear too." The fire snapped softly in the hearth. Caleb did not speak. The words settled over him, heavier than any accusation the council had thrown. Ava saw his hand close at his side, not in anger, but restraint. "His mother disappeared from his world," she said gently. "Everyone probably told him to be strong afterward, to behave, to stop crying, to be royal. But he is 5 years old. He does not need another command. He needs someone to stay." Noah's breathing softened against her arm. Caleb looked away toward the dark window, where snow had begun to gather against the glass. For the first time, he did not look like a king carved from black stone. He looked like a father who had conquered every enemy except the silence of his own child. Then Noah lifted his head, reached across the space between them, and placed one small hand in Caleb's open palm while still holding on to Ava with the other. For 3 quiet days, the royal wing changed around Ava in ways no one dared name. Noah began sitting near the window instead of hiding beneath the table. He accepted warm milk when Ava placed it beside him, and small clay wolves when Caleb shaped them clumsily with hands made for crowns and battle maps, not children's toys. Sometimes the boy held Ava's sleeve with one hand and Caleb's finger with the other, as if he were testing whether the world could keep 2 promises at once. The palace noticed. Servants whispered in stairwells. Guards lowered their voices when Ava passed. Even the old royal wolves that slept beyond the glass doors of the winter courtyard lifted their heads when she entered, their silver eyes following her with a stillness that felt almost like respect. Madison Vale noticed most of all. She watched from the far end of corridors, dressed in pale silk and patience, her smile polished thin enough to cut moonlight. On the 4th morning, the council called for a private hearing to determine whether Ava's presence near the heir was a temporary remedy or an unlawful influence. Caleb refused at first. Grant Keller reminded him that the court had already seen too much to be satisfied with closed doors and royal silence. By sunset, the smaller council chamber was arranged like a trap pretending to be law. Ava stood near the center rug with Noah tucked close to her side, while Caleb remained at the head of the room, one hand resting on the back of his chair, his golden eyes unreadable. Madison sat beside Grant with a lavender handkerchief folded neatly in her lap. Ava saw it and felt her stomach tighten. The scent was soft, expensive, and wrong in a way she could not explain. It did not drift naturally. It waited. Grant cleared his throat. If the Omega is truly harmless, then the air should remain calm without theatrical silence, covered mirrors, and lowered voices. Ava looked at Caleb. His expression did not change, but the room felt colder. "This hearing is not a performance," he said. Madison smiled. "Of course not, Your Majesty. We only seek truth." Then she lifted the handkerchief to her mouth, as if to hide a cough. The scent opened in the air. Noah went completely still. Not loud, not wild. Still. Ava felt the change before anyone else saw it. The sudden tightening of his fingers in her sleeve, the way his breathing caught as if the room had tilted beneath him. His eyes fixed on the lavender cloth. The color drained from his face. Ava knelt instantly. "Noah, look at me." He did not. His small body trembled so hard the clay wolf in his hand slipped onto the rug. Around them, council members shifted back. Grant's voice rose with cold satisfaction. "The air is unstable. Stand away from him." 2 attendants reached for a silver thread restraint kept for emergencies. Caleb moved, but Grant stepped into his path with the full weight of council law behind him. "If you interfere, they will say you hid the truth." Ava heard the words, but they blurred beneath Noah's broken breath. She understood then. The scent was not comfort. It was a memory sharpened into a weapon. Someone had wrapped grief in perfume and placed it in front of a child. Ava moved before fear could stop her. She crossed the rug, set herself between Noah and the silver thread, and opened her arms without grabbing. "Him. You are not there," she whispered. "You are here. Stone floor. Warm fire. My voice. Your father is across the room." He did not leave. Noah made a small sound that cracked down the middle. Ava began to hum the old melody again, the one she did not remember learning. This time the room changed with it. The lamps softened. The windows silvered with moonlight though the sun had not fully gone. Caleb's face went utterly still because he knew that song. Every royal child knew it. It was the lullaby his late queen had sung only behind locked doors, a song never written, never taught, never performed outside the bloodline. Madison's handkerchief slipped from her fingers. Ava did not see it fall. She only felt Noah lean into her, shaking less with every breath, while the faint mark beneath her sleeve began to glow. The glow beneath Ava's sleeve was not bright at first. It was a quiet silver pulse, half hidden by worn gray fabric, like moonlight trying to breathe through cloth. But every wolf in the council chamber felt it. The royal guards at the door straightened. The old wolves beyond the glass lifted their heads at once, their ears forward, their eyes reflecting the impossible light. Caleb did not look at Madison. He did not look at Grant. He looked only at Ava, and for the first time since she had entered his palace, the Alpha King seemed less certain of the world beneath his feet. Ava kept humming because Noah still needed the sound. His small hands were twisted around her sleeve, but his breathing was no longer breaking apart. The terrible stiffness had left his shoulders. The fear in his face loosened little by little, as if her voice had found him somewhere far away and led him back across the snow. "Impossible," Madison whispered. The word was too sharp, too frightened to be disbelief. Grant Keller heard it and seized on it like a man catching a weapon from the air. "Enough," he said. "This is no comfort. This is forbidden influence." Ava finally looked up. The room swayed around her in candlelight and polished stone, but she did not release Noah. "You brought that scent here," she said softly. Madison's eyes narrowed. "Careful, Omega." He knew it. Ava glanced at the fallen handkerchief on the rug, still carrying its sweet, false lavender. Not because it comforted him, because it hurt him. Caleb's voice came low from the head of the room. "Explain." No one moved. Ava swallowed, aware of every noble stare, every breath waiting to judge whether she would collapse under the weight of speaking. "It was made to resemble someone he lost," she said. "But it was wrong. Too perfect. Too heavy. Like a memory copied by someone who never loved the person it belonged to." The silence that followed was colder than the snow pressing against the chamber windows. Noah turned his face toward Madison, and the softness in him vanished. Not into panic, into recognition. He lifted one trembling hand and pointed at her. Madison stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "This is absurd. You are listening to a servant who bewitched a grieving child." "She sang the Queen's cradle song," Caleb said. Madison froze. Grant's fingers tightened around the top of his cane. Caleb took one slow step around the council table. "A song that was never written down. A song my wife sang only to our son." Ava's breath caught. The hum faded from her lips, but the melody seemed to linger in the room without her, folded into the firelight, the glass, the listening wolves outside. "I did not know," she whispered. "No," Caleb said, and there was something dangerous and almost reverent in his voice. "But something in you did." Grant lifted his chin. "Your Majesty, grief is making you reckless. The law requires that any unknown mark near the royal heir be restrained and examined." Two attendants moved toward a silver case on the sideboard. Ava felt Noah tense again. This time, before fear could swallow him, the child stepped in front of her. He was small, barefoot on the rug, one hand still gripping her dress, but the sound that left him was not a cry. It rolled through the chamber with the clear authority of royal blood waking inside a child who had been dismissed as broken. The attendant stopped. The case remained closed. Outside, the royal wolves answered, not with chaos, but with one long, unified howl that made the windows tremble like bells. Ava looked down at the mark now glowing openly around her wrist. The shape was clearer than before, a crescent moon curving beneath the outline of a wolf's crown. Caleb saw it. Madison saw it. Grant saw it. And whatever mask the council had been wearing began to crack. Noah pressed his back against Ava's knees, protecting her with all the strength his little body had, and whispered one word into the stunned room. "Mine." Noah's whisper did not sound large enough to change a kingdom, but the moment it left his mouth, every wolf in the council chamber bowed its head. Not the nobles. Not yet. The wolves first. The old royal guardians beyond the glass doors lowered themselves onto the snow-covered terrace with a slow, ancient dignity, their silver eyes fixed on Ava as if they had been waiting years to recognize her. Inside the room, no one breathed. Madison stared at the child as though he had betrayed her personally. Grant Keller's face hardened, but his hand trembled where it rested on his cane. "He is a frightened boy," Grant said, too quickly. "A word spoken under distress has no legal weight." Caleb turned his head toward him, and the temperature in the room seemed to fall by 10 degrees. "Then perhaps the mark will speak louder." Ava's pulse stumbled. She looked down at her wrist, where the crescent and wolf crown glowed beneath Noah's small palm. It did not burn. It warmed. It felt like standing near a window after a long winter and realizing the sun had not forgotten the world. Noah turned to face her fully, his little expression solemn in a way no child should have to be. "Safe," he said again, clearer this time. Then he placed both hands around her wrist and pressed his forehead to the silver light. The mark opened. That was the only word Ava had for it. The crescent brightened, the wolf crown sharpened, and a ring of pale moonlight spread across the rug beneath them, washing over the council table, the cold silver case, Madison's fallen handkerchief, and the polished black boots of every noble who had called Ava weak without ever looking at her. The hidden scent inside the handkerchief rose suddenly, exposed by the light, no longer sweet, no longer elegant, but thin and artificial, like flowers locked too long in glass. Noah pointed at it. "Bad," he whispered. A murmur moved through the room. Madison reached for the cloth, but Caleb was faster with a command than she was with her hand. "Leave it." She froze. Grant stepped forward, his voice tight. "Your Majesty, this proves nothing." Caleb did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "It proves someone brought a false memory of my wife into this chamber and placed it before my son." Madison's composure cracked. "I only wanted to help him." Noah shook his head and moved closer to Ava. The mark flashed once, and the terrace doors opened without anyone touching them. Cold air swept in, carrying snowflakes and the deep pine scent of the royal pack. The wolves entered one by one, enormous and silent, not rushing, not threatening, simply bearing witness. They circled Ava and Noah, then lowered themselves before her. Ava's throat tightened. She had been bowed to exactly never in her life. Not by servants, not by guards, not by anyone. Yet the oldest royal wolf rested its massive head on the floor at her feet, and the council had no story ready for that. Caleb stepped beside Ava, close enough that his shadow joined hers on the moonlit rug, but he did not touch her without permission. His gaze moved from the mark to his son, then to the stunned court. "This is not a make claim," he said, each word cutting cleanly through the chamber. "This is the royal cub's recognition. An heir may call only one living soul by that bond. A protector of the bloodline. A keeper of peace. The one his wolf trusts before law, blood, or throne." Ava could barely breathe. "I am just an omega," she whispered. Caleb looked at her then, and the ice in his expression softened at the edges. "No," he said. "You are the first person in this palace who saw my son before you saw his crown." Noah lifted Ava's marked wrist for the entire chamber to see. His small voice shook, but it did not break. "Luna," he said. The word fell like a bell through the room. Madison went pale. Grant lowered his eyes for half a second, and in that half second, guilt showed itself more clearly than confession. Caleb saw it. So did Ava. So did the wolves. The Alpha King turned toward the council, his voice quiet enough to terrify every person listening. "Touch her again," he said, "and you answer to my wolf." The council chamber did not erupt after Caleb's warning. It folded inward, silent and airless, the way a room becomes when every lie inside it realizes there is nowhere left to stand. Madison Vale lowered her hand from the fallen handkerchief, her perfect composure unraveling one thread at a time. Grant Keller tried to speak first, because men like him believed words could build walls around consequences, but Caleb looked at the silver case on the sideboard, then at the artificial scent still exposed beneath the moonlit glow, and Grant's mouth closed. "Lady Madison Vale will be removed from Luna consideration until a full inquiry is complete," Caleb said. His voice carried no rage now, only law sharpened by grief. "Councilman Keller will surrender his authority over matters concerning the royal heir." Grant's face tightened. "Your Majesty, the council will not accept an Omega servant being placed above tradition." The oldest royal wolf lifted its head from Ava's feet and stared at him. Grant stopped speaking. That silence was the first apology Ava had ever received from power, and even then, it was not given freely. It was pulled from them by a child, a mark, and a circle of wolves that recognized what people had refused to see. Noah still held her wrist, his small thumb resting over the silver crescent as if he feared it might vanish if he let go. Ava looked down at him and saw exhaustion returning now that the danger had passed, not the wild terror the court had named him for, but the heavy tiredness of a little boy who had been brave for too long. She knelt before him, ignoring the nobles who watched as if kneeling had become something sacred only because she chose it. "You did well," she whispered. Noah leaned into her, his forehead against her shoulder. "Stay." The word was so small that it nearly broke her. Ava had spent her life being moved from room to room, task to task, corner to corner, never asked where she wished to stand. Now the heir of the northern packs looked at her as if her staying could hold the whole world together. Caleb heard it too. His expression changed, not into command, not into possession, but into something quieter and far more dangerous to Ava's guarded heart. "Respect. Ava Miller," he said, and for the first time her name sounded like it belonged in the same room as a crown. "You are not a prisoner here. You are not a servant being claimed by the court. If you wish to leave this palace, I will have an escort take you anywhere in the territory before morning." Madison looked up sharply, stunned that he would offer choice where the council had expected ownership. Ava stared at him, unsure what to do with kindness that did not ask to be praised for existing. "And if I stay?" she asked. Caleb's gaze moved to Noah, then back to her. "Then you stay because you choose to. You will be protected. You will be taught what that mark means. And no one in this palace will call you weak again without answering to me." Snow drifted through the open terrace doors, melting before it touched the moonlit rug. Noah slipped his hand into hers. The royal wolves rose as one, forming a quiet path toward the doors, not forcing her forward, simply making room. Ava looked at the nobles who had laughed when she knelt to scrub their spilled wine. They were not laughing now. Some stared at the floor. Some bowed their heads. None of it filled the hollow places in her past, but it did show her something she had never been allowed to believe. Being gentle had not made her powerless. It had made her the only person who could reach a child everyone else had tried to rule. Ava stood with Noah beside her, and Caleb a respectful step away, and the mark on her wrist warmed like dawn beneath her skin. "I will stay," she said softly, "not for the throne. For him." Noah smiled then, small and sleepy and real, the first unguarded smile the palace had seen since Frostpine Pass. Caleb closed his eyes for one brief second, as if the sight had given him back a breath he had been holding for months. Later, when the court doors opened and the palace gathered in stunned silence,